Hi, this is Denise Yee, your host for Transforming Your Entrepreneur Path Summit. Welcome again, everybody. And today's special guest is John Ruhlin. John, do you want to say hi to everybody?
Hey everybody, thanks Denise for having me.
John Ruhlin is an extraordinary entrepreneur with a background as a #1 sales rep all time for a $200 million direct sale company. John has a very unique expertise, leadership approach, appreciation, and gifting. According to the Inc.com, he is considered to be the foremost expert on developing relationship with key executives and his clients, including Miami Dolphins, Fortune 500 companies. He also regularly hangs out with folks like Darren Hardy, John Maxwell, Jeffrey Gitomer, is that how you pronounce it? And more.
Jeffrey Gitomer,
Is that
yep.
how you pronounce it?
Yeah, he's the #1 sales author the last probably 7 or 8 years running. So yeah, Jeffrey Gitomer.
Okay. Um, and I heard your latest project is a book titled The Appreciative Leader, right? And it's expected to be out early next year.
That's correct. That is
Great.
correct.
So John, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you mentioned about um, you're in St. Louis. You traveled to Ohio once before when you were younger, and now you're traveling all around the world. So tell us, how did you get there?
Yeah, well actually I grew up, I live in St. Louis or just outside of St. Louis now, but I grew up in Ohio on a small farm, one of 6 kids, kind of the poor farmer's kid, would be the best way to kind of describe it. And so I got great grades in school, got the straight A's, and so if you're poor and you get straight A's, you go be a doctor or a lawyer. So I was in pre-med in college, and I'd started a side business, basically working for Time Warner Cable. I bought a truck and was changing out parts, making like $40 an hour, which as a college kid was great. The only challenge was I fell off the ladder twice and got lucky I didn't get injured either time, but I decided like I'm not going to end up being a doctor, I'm going to end up a lifelong patient. So I started looking for other opportunities, and fortunately I stumbled upon an opportunity to start working with a company and interning with a company called Cutco, the knives, and they're one of the largest direct sales companies in the world, and that's where my real kind of journey began.
So we'll edit the video. So that's where you're gonna end. All right. So today, we mentioned about earlier because you're so diverse. You're into sales, you're into marketing, and you have in-depth knowledge of many aspects of business. So now, what I want to ask you is that you mentioned about door opener, and it's a very high-level relationship building type of strategies that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how is it going to help our audience?
Yeah, well, fortunately, when I interned with Cutco, one of my mentors, my first mentor, was an attorney. And even though he was an attorney, he made money off of things that were non-attorney related. He owned part of banks, he owned part of real estate, oil wells. And the common thing that I saw that he did, that I modeled, was he was the most generous person I'd ever met up until that point. He was always giving things away. And so he would find a deal on random things like noodles. He'd buy a semi-load of noodles and give them away to everybody at church the next week. The church would be raffling off a Harley Davidson to benefit the school, and he'd end up buying a third of the tickets and then giving the Harley back after he won it. And so I started to model a lot of those best practices, and one of the first things I did was I pitched him on the idea of giving away Cutco, and I wanted him to buy pocket knives for all of his executive clients that were men. And he got this little twinkle in his eye, and he said, "John, what about the paring knives and some of the kitchen stuff?" And I said, "Paul, all your clients are men. Why would you give paring knives?" And he said, "Because they're all married. And if I take care of the whole family, everything else takes care of itself." So I started to model those best practices. For instance, I would find out a CEO that I'd want to get in the door with. And so I take a $150 carving set. I'd find out the wife's name of the CEO. I'd engrave it on the pieces. And I would put a little note inside that said, "Carve out 5 minutes for me. I promise it'll be worth your while." And I'd get the meeting. And the CEO would be blown away that I was 22, not 52, coming in to meet with this guy. And so I started to realize that a lot of people talk about adding value, but very few people are willing to invest on the front end and really wow somebody. And so when I would show up to a meeting, most people would buy lunch for the executive. I would take it a step further. I would show up with a $200 gift for the executive and say, thanks for carving out time for me. Whether you ever buy or not, I want you to know I appreciated this hour that you spent with me. And the executive was just 9 out of 10 times, they were like almost falling all over themselves, wanting to reciprocate, because not only had I picked up the tab and I was 22, but I was giving them a $200 gift they could take home to their spouse that was personalized, all about them. Nobody, not even their biggest clients and their biggest suppliers, were showing up with a $200 gift, let alone somebody that was just asking for 30 minutes of their time. And so I think I really put people, I spun things on their head because I was willing to offer value before I asked for anything in return. And so that's really, I can tell you great stories about door openers, and I'd love to share some of those stories, but at a core level, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about it. You should give value, 3 to 6 times before you ask for anything in return. And most of the time, people are doing a tit for tat. I gave you something, now you better give me something in return. And that makes people feel slimy. Like, nobody really enjoys that process. And so I think at a core level, 14 years ago when I started, that was something I saw Paul, my mentor, doing, and I just started to model it with other people.
Got it. So first of all, I want to ask you something, is how could you afford it monetarily?
Well, that's a great question. Well, one thing is I was out there hustling. Like my first 10 days interning with Cutco, I did 40 appointments in my first 10 days. I was working 16, 18-hour days, probably like a lot of people. When you're launching a business, you're on 24/7. It's difficult. And so fortunately, I was not just selling to businesses. I was selling Cutco to homeowners. But I was reinvesting almost every dollar of profit I was making back into the business at the start. Eventually, that builds momentum. But I viewed that as kind of, if I was going to take my business to the level I wanted to grow to, and I wasn't doing it for every single person I was meeting, but I was doing it once a week. And so once a week to invest a $200 gift probably cost me $100. To me, that was a no-brainer. That was just the cost of getting my business off the ground.
That makes a lot of sense, because you budgeted yourself as well, and then you gradually knowing what's going on and where you're going by with that vision, then you're able to reinvest money back into your business for bigger accounts. So
Yep.
so that's a very good that's great. I love it. So the second question for you is that a lot of our audience in our group has giving too much, to an extent they exhaust themselves, and it's like it's not just money, but energetically and their time, and
Yep.
then they're struggling to make money.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I went through some of those periods where I was probably giving more than I should, but I think at the end of the day, at a core level, I'd rather give too much than not enough, and so I got better about kind of filtering out and setting aside time for myself and taking an entire month off once a year. Up until I got married and had 2 little ones, I was taking a month off every year because I was, to keep from burning out. I think a lot of people, when they're a solopreneur or they're a small business, that burnout rate is very easy to occur. And so I definitely can see that. But I think at some level, being able to give a lot on the front end, if you stay in the game long enough, you will reap what you've sown. And I think a lot of times people give up right before that opportunity to have that breakthrough occurs, because they have poured out so much of themselves. It's just, but I've been doing this for 14 years, so I've been able to see the peaks and valleys of planting those seeds, and they don't always grow when I want them to grow. That's just the nature of business.
Okay, so I got some questions here. I take a lot of notes. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
So when you said screening and filtering, and then there's a couple questions here. One is how do you do that? And second thing is that you talk about a lot of giving, and then from the filtering process, you're able to really narrow it down to your goal and the type of people you want to work with. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, I think that at a core level, one thing that I've realized is I want to be giving to other givers. There's takers out there, and I think that we all know at a core level when we meet somebody that's a taker, and yet we want to convert them. At least my tendency is to want to convert them into a giver. And if they're not wired that way, 99 out of 100 times, you're not going to inspire somebody to be a giver. I can't say that I haven't leveraged or been able to partner with takers, but you just have to go into it protecting yourself and knowing, where what their hot buttons are and figuring out what's important to them and aligning with what's important to them so that you make sure that you're taken care of as well. But I think the biggest thing is just being able to say no to people that are not aligned with your core values and they're not aligned with the things that are important to you. And so I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me was stop giving to takers.
Okay. And how do you deal with receiving part of it?
I would say that I definitely like to keep the scales pushed more towards giving more than I receive. But I think that that's something that I've been able to be okay with. I feel like maybe it's growing up, poor or whatever else, but I've been okay with receiving, especially when I'm giving 10 times more value than I'm asking for in return. So I think that that hasn't really been that much of a struggle for me. I do know that there's some people out there that give and give and give, and but they don't receive ever. And I think that that's probably one of the secrets to success is being able to be, if you're thoughtful enough to give, you need to be humble enough to receive.
That's nice.
That makes sense?
Nice. That's beautiful. You're very young, and I see some really beautiful energy in you. That's amazing. I didn't have that awakening when I was 22.
Well, it's been a journey. I can't say that when I was 20 and I started on my journey that I received all of that. It's been, I think a lot of it is looking back, usually. You start to recognize those patterns and things. But in the moment, I was confused and scared and, excited and all the other emotions that come along with going on, a crazy journey. I thought I was going to go to med school. I had no idea I was going to launch a business and speak. Speaking would have been the farthest thing from my mind growing up on a farm. Like, what was I going to speak on? Like that would have made no sense. I would have told people they were crazy if they would have said that. So
you're like, who am I speaking to? The moo-moos from the farm?
Yeah. What animals are going to listen to me? Like, yeah, makes zero sense.
So now there's a lot of struggling that from our audience about how much to charge, which tied to the value of their time and their worth and their service. Now we are being very specific, tying to the offers and time with money. Do you have any idea and contribution to that aspect of the thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's easy when you're first getting launched to want to just take whatever product you can at any price. And I think there is a value in being able to create that relationship with somebody. And so there's been times I've done things for free. But I think the worst thing that you can do is to set your price too low. I would rather set my price really high and say, I love what you're doing and I'm gonna offer it for free versus I'm gonna start at this ridiculously low price. Because I do think that there's an essence of people assign the value that you assign to it. And so if you start yourself way too low, I've just seen people not take myself or other people seriously. And so I lend myself towards setting my price very, very high and almost scaring people and being willing to make concessions as a result of what I view as opportunity. But I think the worst thing you can do is start too low.
That is a great. That is. I totally agree. Love it. So
Thanks.
now, and thank you so much for sharing, because it's really a reinstatement of giving people confidence and let them believe that they are valued. And your strategy of pricing it really high, and if you want to offer it for free or discount, at least people are going to take that more seriously.
Absolutely.
Another question. Now let's go back to door opener, and I'd like to know the strategies and the step by step, what's going on, and how do we best partner with high level leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think that I can give you some examples of some stories, but I think that most of the time when somebody's trying to build that relationship, they hold back 5, 10, 20%. They say, well, this is good enough. Simple things like when we first started launching, I didn't have money for a website and some of these things that were really fancy, and so I took something as simple as my business card, and I said, this is something I hand out all the time, and yet most people like devalue it. They go as cheap as possible, 2 cents, 3 cents. If they're crazy, they spend 10 cents on the business card. And so I said, this is one of the few touch points I have that I might get an opportunity to spend 30 seconds with a CEO at an event, in a box suite at a basketball game. I want that to communicate who we are. And so I said, what's the most expensive business card I could find? And our first iteration was inspired by the movie Hitch. Have you ever seen the movie Hitch? It's Will Smith. He's this kind of like love doctor. His business card is this square black piece of cardboard. So I said, what if I could do that but in metal, like the American Express black card? And so I took that business card idea and created one out of metal. It was $1 a piece, the first iterations. It was amazing when I would say, like, this is who we are, this is what we're about. We're all about appreciative leadership and strategic appreciation. We build relationships with some of the world leaders. All that was just buzzwords and jargon until I handed them my business card, and they would look at it and they'd say, that's the coolest business card I've ever seen. Oh my gosh, I get what you're talking about now. So we took that a few years later. We're like, it's not cool enough. What if we spent $2 or $3? Now our business cards cost $3 a piece, and they're amazing. But most people are like, $3, how can you afford that? And I said, well, I could spend $10 on a brochure that somebody's going to throw away as soon as I leave, or I can spend $3 on a business card that they show to 50 other people. And so it's amazing how the mindset of saying, what's the cheapest I can invest in this, to what's the most expensive I can invest in this, and figuring out the little details that you can really latch onto and to show different. So some of the things I think that are important when you want to connect with a busy executive is most executives, let's say 80% of them are men, just for, I think round numbers. Most of them are married. And most of the executives are being taken out to nice dinners, golf outings, private, planes. It's hard to wow them. But if I take care of their spouse, their assistant, and their kids, those are 3 people, 3 inner circle categories that are usually neglected by that executive. And so that's the angle I focus on. I take care of those 3 inner circles, and not only do I make the executive look good to their spouse and their kids, I get the executive along with it. So for instance, the reason the knives worked so well is it was something that instead of bringing home a bottle of scotch or a golf club or a piece of hunting gear, they were bringing something home that they could actually use with the whole family. The spouses love me because I focus on them, and oftentimes 80% of the time they're female, but at the end of the day, like focusing on the family versus the executive is the way that I built, like Darren Hardy, CEO of Success Magazine, amazing individual. He flies all over the world. I send gifts to his wife, Georgia. I send them to him. He takes them home to Georgia. Georgia says, who's this John Ruhlin guy? I want to meet this John Ruhlin guy. She's talking about me every single day. She becomes my salesperson for me. And it cost me a couple $100 to have an internal salesperson working on Darren. Darren's now become a friend, an advocate. But at the end of the day, like, sending him gifts and door openers that apply to his wife are really what. If you Google Darren Hardy and Cutco and John Ruhlin, you'll see, like, he talks about the knives. He sent it out to his 150,000 subscribers. That's crazy. But I think that most of the time it's uncomfortable for people to go against the grain, and so it's easier to say, I'm going to do what everybody else does. I'm going to focus. I'm going to make my business cards look like everybody else. I'm going to send gifts to the executive versus the spouse. I'm going to send a generic gift that promotes me with my brand versus making it personalized to the executive. Like, if you see any of the gifts I ever send out, there's no logo of mine on it. My name is not on it. I make it all about the person. And in doing so, they brag about me because I've made the gift all about the recipient versus a promotional thing about me. And I think that, I mean, I could talk about all 16 of those questions you should ask yourself before you send out a gift. But those are some of the core questions that I think that most people are not willing to ask themselves and then to actually act on it.
Okay. I do want to see your business card, though. Holographic. You get a dancing woman.
No, it's let's see if I have if I have one before the end of the show, I'll show it to you. But to take it a step further, our letterhead now is like $8 a piece. It's made out of steel. It comes in a black envelope with silver foil, and you write on it with a Sharpie. It's amazing. Nobody sends handwritten thank you notes anymore, but let alone that are actually like works of art. Like, people can't throw them away. Now, $8 seems crazy, but if you're going to take the time to handwrite a note to somebody, what are they worth to you? Probably a lot more than $8. And so I think people go cheap on the things that they really should reconsider, taking it up a few notches.
I love it because everything from where you stand and the way you give and truly tune into the other party's energy and their needs, it's from a space of really, truly love and giving. So it's not scarcity, because a lot of times when people start giving, they feel like, oh my gosh, what about myself? And so they feel like there's not enough for themselves. Therefore, it's hard to give. There's not enough money to spend on my business, and now I have to give this expensive card, these expensive gifts. So there's that positioning and space where you're coming from, and many of the small business owners or service providers. It's great. I mean, how I feel about your energy is just wonderful, and thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. It's been it's awesome to be able to pass it on, because I really feel like these are things that are actionable that really can impact somebody's company.
I bet. So you did earlier when we talked, you mentioned about how to get executives to return your call and all those strategies. If you could give the audience a list of 5 or 6 things, what would that be?
Well, I think I'll tell a story first, and then we'll kind of reverse engineer it a little bit. And so we had an entrepreneur reach out to us and say, John, this president is one of 5 people that could really change our business. We've tried to reach them over the last 18 months, phone calls, emails, creative brochures, whatever else, no response. And the person who they were targeting was literally the president of the electronics division for Target, the company out of Minneapolis, the big retailer. And so there's only 5 people that could really change their business. This was one of them. I said, well, we'll spend any amount of money if we can get a meeting with these guys. And so I said, okay, well, let's figure out what, let's do a little research. And so we did research on him. The president went to undergrad, University of Minnesota, got his MBA from University of Minnesota, and is now living in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's obviously a Minnesota boy. So we said, we only have one shot here. We really need to blow the store open. It's really important. So we took a piece of cherry wood that was the size of a 42-inch plasma TV. It was massive. And then it was like 60 pounds, and we carved the mascot of the Gopher logo into the top, and then the fight song lyrics into it, and then tied in the fight song lyrics into why they wanted to meet with him. And we sent it off with a note. And within 24 hours, the assistant had called back and said, I don't know who you guys are, where you're from, but I had to get a dolly to get this thing in and out of his office. He's blown away. He's tied up this week, but he'll talk to you next week at 3 p.m. or 3:30 p.m. About whatever you want to talk about. And so they were flabbergasted. Obviously, the call ended up happening. Unfortunately, the business, even though they got the meetings they needed to, their value proposition was a little bit too forward-thinking. They were very bleeding-edge technology. But the reason that gift worked was, one, we made it all about the recipient, and I kind of talked about that before. Two, take the time to research. Like with social media, most of the time, people don't take the time to go and look on their Facebook account and look on their Instagram account, find out what's really important to them. Like that research to see what makes somebody tick is so incredibly important. Making sure that it's fully personalized, making sure that if you are going to, if that person really is a game changer for your business, that was not a cheap investment on their part, but most people, like I said, hold back 5 or 10%, and they say, this is good enough. And most of the time, when you're dealing with a busy executive, good enough is not good enough. I mean, they're getting 300 to 500 emails a day. Think about how many text messages an average person gets, phone calls. They're dealing with family stuff. You have to really rock their world in order to shake them out of their normal day-to-day patterns to be able to take a phone call. And so I think that if you're going to do it, make sure that it aligns with your core values. I think most companies would say they're first class, world class, best in class. Whatever touch point or whatever door opener you're going to try to use, make sure that the gift aligns with your core values. And if you really say you're the best or that you're top notch or number one or any of those things, you can't send some trinket and think that that's going to communicate the value that you place on the relationship. I think that's asking yourself, what is this relationship worth and value to you? And then assigning that value to whatever you're going to invest on that person. And it doesn't have to be always a tangible gift. We do other things to add value to our relationships or people that we want to get in front of. But I think most people, they hold back. And I think that's a huge mistake.
Okay. Yeah, because a lot of times people hold back. Bear in mind, it's not just money we're talking about. There's a lot of energy and there's a lot of emotion that ties to it with expectation.
Yeah.
And so that could be very devastating if I prepare this whole thing and it's for a couple months and it's not turning out to be expected. Is there? I know that you've done this, and your idea is just keep on doing it, keep on going. In a long-term basis, it'll pay and it'll grow your business. So when do you know when to stop? And also, how do you have our audience, these solo practitioners, small business owners, to see, just keep on going?
Yeah, well, I think for me, when I recognize somebody that's a game changer for my business or somebody that aligns with my values or I think that could be instrumental as a client or as a referral partner, you talked about the joint venture stuff. I think that if you figure out that person does align, and I'm of the belief that I'm planting seeds and I'm going to continue to plant seeds. Some of my best relationships have taken 5, 6, 7, 8 years to grow into them. So I think a lot of times it's so easy just to give up or to move on to the next thing, and you don't allow the time. Like a huge oak tree doesn't grow into a huge oak tree overnight. And in most relationships, as much as we want to, in our digital age, we want it now, there is value in showing that year 2, year 3, year 4, that you're for real. I think a lot of times people are testing to say, I'm not going to switch over my entire clientele of referrals to you because I don't know if you're going to be around 6 months or 12 months later. And so I think that I don't stop. I mean, until somebody either is like, you're driving me crazy, don't send me any more gifts or don't reach out to me, like I'm continuing to add value. And not everybody am I doing the exact same thing. Some of the people that I've built relationships with, it didn't cost me any money, but the creativity of what I brought to the table and some of the things that I did for them is, yeah, cost $0, but there was risk involved. Anytime you're going to go over the top and it be outrageous, there is risk. And I think a lot of times people get any amount of resistance or they don't get the response. I think there's an expectation of, if I don't get the amazing response I want, we put expectations on it. We have no idea what's going on in their world. They might be going through a divorce. Their kids might be sick. And we did this amazing thing for them. They may never forget it, but they may not give you the response for 6 months or 12 months or until you run into that person again 2 years later. So I guess the simple answer is you don't stop. The pipeline needs to always be filled, and you don't treat it like a faucet to be turned off. Like it's just kind of a way of being, and it's a way of continuing to respond and act.
Okay. One of the questions came out is that how do you entertain so many clients and building so many relationships without draining out your energy?
Well, I'd say for one, I do take time for myself. I do try to take care of myself with what I eat, the people I surround myself with. I do take time away to spend with my family, to shut down, to recharge. But there are times where I probably burn the candle at both ends and get myself run down. That's usually when I pull back and I'm like, I have to slow things down a little bit. I would say as of late, I've been, I think I have a lot of relationships, thousands of relationships, but I've been trying to focus in on the core that I really enjoy, that not only am I giving energy to, but that I'm getting energy from. And so I just got back from an event up in Toronto called Mastermind Talks that a friend of mine, Jason Gaynard, had put on, and those 100 people were all givers. And so even though I was giving a lot and pouring out a lot, and those were long days, I walked away from that event just refreshed because I was spending time with people that were like-minded, they were givers. And so I think being careful who you spend your time with is, and I think we all kind of know that, but actually practicing it in protecting our time is very, very difficult for even myself, because I'm a yes person and I want to give to everybody, and that's just not possible.
That is true, because it's not just about, in business, it's not just about building relationship. So it's about then once you enter into a relationship with an agreement, for me, I will want to devote 100% of myself. But then how would somebody like Richard Branson, who has 300 businesses and able to maintain the integrity and continue to build on and give himself the attention to all these projects? And that is something that many business owners are struggling, because it's not just about building a relationship, it's also maintaining and being devoted into different projects.
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think the higher up the totem pole, those are the Richard Bransons of the world, are the people that you want to connect with and build a relationship with, but they're very protective of their time. And I think that the idea of pouring into the right people becomes more and more key. That the higher up the food chain, or the higher up the person that you want to build the relationship with is, and it takes that focused energy and time to really wow them into wanting to engage. I think of like Joe Polish, Joe Polish, who's has Piranha Marketing. I think the first time he connected with Richard Branson, I think he ended up giving him like a $250,000 donation to his foundation. That was how he got his attention. Now, Joe didn't start off doing that, but I mean, that's the mindset of somebody that wants to build a relationship and is willing to walk the talk. Now, that's a pretty bold action, and not all of us can take that action, but it's something that we can aspire to and know that those are the sorts of things that, I mean, Joe, relative to Richard Branson is a peon inside the business and whatever else, but he has really been able to connect with Richard in a very meaningful way, because he was willing to put focused energy into that relationship.
That's true. So do you have any other suggestions a lot of this, how is this the whole door openers connecting with your ideal clients? How is this whole joint venture and relationship building has anything to do with the smaller business owners and solar entrepreneurs?
I mean, really, I think that everything that I've shared, like my company, even though we play big, I say we're the minnow that gets to play with whales. Like we're not. I mean, I have 7 employees. I don't have 700 employees, and so I think that all the tools that I've mentioned are accessible to even the solopreneurs. I mean, I have authors and experts and other people that are friends of mine that we've been able to engage this with. And so I would say that if you can't afford to do some of these techniques with 100 people or 1,000 people, start with 1. You know, like when I was in college, I did 1 per week, and I think even initially it was 1 per month. But the goal is I think a lot of people say, well, I can't do that because I don't have this budget, or I don't have this much money, or I don't have the resources that some of these people have. And I think that the fallacy is waiting to get to that point. You don't get to that point unless you're able to just start small. And so I think the handwritten notes and some of the little details are really important. I think the going into every relationship looking to offer value multiple times before you're asking for anything in return is something that oftentimes doesn't cost anything, but it's an entire mindset shift. And I think that if you continue to practice those things, you'll start to slowly build some momentum. And it won't be in a month or 2. It's usually, I have a mentor who says everything happens in 18-month growth curves. And 18 months is about the time period when most of the time people want to give up. They're like, I've done it for a year and I'm not seeing the results I want. And frankly, you have to go that it's cliche to say go the extra mile, but oftentimes it's not in the time period that we want. It's in that 18 months when we think it should be a year. Right.
This is funny because I used to think 12-month, and then there's a 10-year mark, there's a 5-year mark, and 10-year mark, right? And
yeah.
So, but then 18-month came up to me as I was speaking to one of the experts last week. So I think 18-month it is a key, and it will be a breakthrough. So John, as you were talking, I kind of brought it down to earth. Let's say if I'm a speaker, I'm a coach. I'm a very task list type of person. I write down a list of, let's say if I'm going to do implement your door opener strategy, I will sit down and put a list of people together. If I'm a publisher, I will write down. If I'm an author, I will write down who are the publishers, who are the key people who could bring me that publicity that I want, and then I'll start it connecting with them one by one. And if I'm a speaker and I like to be in certain shows and speaking events, I will write down who are the people to connect with. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think having your kind of one-pager, your key stakeholders, like who are the key relationships, and every business, every solopreneur, every expert's different. But yes, I think you have to narrow down your list of hundreds or thousands of relationships into the 5, the 10, the 20 that are really, most important, that could really move the needle. And sometimes it's not just clients, it's people that have influence. I think every category I've gone into to sell, whether it's oil and gas, pro sports, I've looked to who's the most influential person in that category that I can solidify a relationship. That's been a way that I've been able to scale very quickly, because if I can make them look good to their relationships, they're going to be able to open up the doors for me when it's appropriate. And I think having that long-term vision and not putting the pressure on that person is a big key, because I think a lot of times we come in, we offer value, and then we want to instantly be connected, and trust takes a little bit of time to be built. But yeah, I think sometimes the list is the most important or the most difficult for people to take the focused time to actually put it together. Even the big companies I work with, it's like pulling teeth sometimes just to get them to say, who are the 100 most important people in your world? You have 100,000. Can't you narrow it down to 100? And a lot of people can't. It's really difficult.
Okay, so that gave me in the audience some ideas of how, because about implementation as well. So, but then that brought up a question, because we have a lot of coaches in this audience group,
Hmm.
in our audience, is that okay? Coaches, their relationship building will be mainly to their individual clients, which
Yep.
I would call the end users, the direct beneficiary. So then there's a dollar amount if I got this deal, this client, and how much money is worth. And so I sometimes that dollar amount is not very big. So how would you deal with like massive number of people in my client list, and then the dollar amount that's tangible is much smaller.
Yeah. Well, for one, I would encourage them to figure out who their people are that they really enjoy working with, and start narrowing down the list so you're raising your rates. I'd say don't spread yourself too thin. I think that's pretty common with like we're getting to the point now where we're just not taking on clients just because they don't fit. It's not that they're bad people or anything else. They just don't fit where the direction of our business is going. And so, but I will say that there's been people that I have in our network that I've probably reinvested just as much as I've made off that person back into them, because their value as a referral center is way more valuable than they could ever be as a client. And so those centers of influence, I think, are really, really important to say, you know, is that person going to be my best client, or are they going to be, am I open to them? Am I open to not making any profit on them, knowing that the influence could be significant? And so I'm going to reinvest all my energy and profits back into them, and knowing that they could refer me 50 people. I've had some people literally refer me 100 different customers. 100. I mean, that's an insane ratio, and that person's way more valuable than even my biggest client. And so I'm willing to take a step back and look at some of those relationships and say, even though I may not be making a lot of money off of them, that's okay, because of the long-term vision I have for where I want to take my business.
Right. In that case, I get it. I get it now. So that just gave me an idea of for those people who are coaches out there who deal with the clients directly. There's also influencers, and those are your source of referrals. So put those people's name down and build relationship with them as well. They might not be your clients, but they are your source of all the referrals and all the other high quality clients. So that's even more valuable than themselves as a client, I think.
Yeah.
So we are close to wrapping up our interview here. I know you're really busy and you got another interview going on, John. Should have allocate more time with us.
I know. I'm sorry.
I know. I'm just joking around with you. So what I want to know before we close out the interview is that what's important for you right now, and what's your latest projects?
The focus right now is getting the Appreciative Leader published. That's really kind of the essence, my story, and the core things that we've learned over the years and modeled and mentored executives in, that kind of how to appreciate your key relationships, and how that appreciation can take your business and your relationships to the next level. And so that's that, and we're continuing to speak quite a bit into the various industries that we're going into. But really our focus is working with CEOs and leaders of growing companies, and a handful of pro sports teams to take their relationships to the next level. And that book will really kind of encapsulate our appreciation roadmap of how to do that. It doesn't matter the industry, it doesn't matter the size of the business. It's we're all humans, and we all have certain core things that are the same, and our goal is to really help people in that area. So
Thank you for sharing. I am so looking forward to that book, and we'll definitely continue on to promote you and your book, so that most importantly, if I see value, I really think the world have to hear what is this about? And so, and to benefit the world is really that's the biggest thing I see in this summit, and that I have in it is a mission for me.
Yeah.
But anyways, so you do have a gift for us to claim. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on some of the core questions to ask yourself before you appreciate your key relationships. There's 16 of those questions to really dive in, whether you're trying to appreciate your assistant or whether you're trying to appreciate your investors or your publishers or different people, anybody that you want to appreciate. And so I would love to be able to offer that as a free gift, those 16 core questions of an appreciative leader. And would be happy to offer it up, to your audience.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add to this interview before we say goodbye to everybody?
I don't think so. You're happy to follow me at Ruhlin is my Twitter handle, and you can check out ruhlingroup.com or johnruhlin.com to find out more of what we teach. And yeah, if there's anybody I can help, I'd be more than happy to respond through email to do so.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you all the audience, and thanks, John, and I appreciate your time, and as well as all the audience that tunes in, and I look forward to continue to this journey with you. And I'm Denise Yee, and today's special guest is John Ruhlin. The upcoming book we're expecting very soon, right? Early next year.
Yep.
The title of the book is The Appreciative Leader, and I wish you best of luck, and thank you so much for your time and your gracious and great wisdom that you share with us.
Thanks,
Goodbye,
Denise.
John.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody, and I'll see you very soon.